Hi students, welcome to the world of stories. Isn't it fascinating when you get transferred, from the real world to another or to an imaginary world? Have you read the fairy tales like, Cinderella? And then have you watched movies like Tangled, etc.? They actually take you to an imaginary world, isn't it? Well, I'm also going to tell you about an amazing world, where days were changed to nights and vice versa. Something like this, I can say. Nights, were meant to work. During the nights, people worked. And during the days, they slept. Where? Do you want to guess where? There was a kingdom. And we're going to talk about that kingdom of fools. Of course, such a kingdom will be called the kingdom of fools, right? So let's see what actually happened in the kingdom of fools. And this story is being written by A.K. Ramanujan. Okay, let me introduce you to its writer. I just now told you the writer is A.K. Ramanujan. And he was born in Mysore. He made his mark first as an Indian English poet in the mid 1960s. He became very famous in India and abroad for his translations of classical Tamil poetry and later of Bhakti poetry in Tamil and Kannada. So actually it's a Kannada folk tale. Okay. Now this story, in the kingdom of fools is a Kannada folk tale, I told you. It's taken from Ramanujan's folk tales from India. Okay. So this is what is about the writer that I want to tell you. I've given you the information about the writer. Now let's see actually what happened in this kingdom of fools. It's quite an interesting chapter. So I want you to listen carefully. And also it is believed that fools are so dangerous that only very wise people can manage them. Right? Who are the fools in the story? What happens to them is what we are going to see. Are you all ready? Come on, let's go to the chapter. I'm going to begin like this. First, let me narrate the story and then I'm going to read it, and simultaneously as I am narrating the story, the word meanings also will be read out and you can take down the word meanings. Shall we? Come on, just listen to the story. In the kingdom of fools, there was a king and his minister, and both were, they were unintelligent, you can say, or they were fools. Absolute fools they were. The king and the minister, did not want to run, or they didn't want to rule the kingdom like the other kings. They wanted something to be different in their kingdom. They didn't like to rule like the other kings. So they decided to do something very different. They changed, or they turned the night as day and day as night. That's the change they have made. They ordered everyone, in the kingdom to work in the nights. And during the day, all the people in the kingdom had to go to sleep. They passed an order that everyone in the kingdom should work at night. Nobody should sleep during the nights, it seems. The farmers will do the farming. They ran businesses, and all the business and shops and everything opened only after the sun set. And everyone would go to sleep once the sun rises. So strange, right? So ridiculous. Weird kind of thinking they had. And if someone disobeys the order, he would be punished with death. Death was the punishment given if anybody disobeys. So the people were scared. They did not obey if they do not obey the king's order, they would be sentenced with death penalty, isn't it? So they had to obey, and it was a very strange decision. Both this king and the minister were fools, and they were very happy that all the people in the kingdom, they followed their orders, isn't it? So they were very happy. Let's see what happened. Yes, the word meanings are given. Idiots, the people who are not intelligent. Till, here, to cultivate land for farming. Degree is the order, okay? One day, a saint arrived to the kingdom of fools. And along with him, there was a disciple. They saw that the whole city was so beautiful. It was sunny, bright, but they could not find anyone around. They were so surprised because all the houses were locked and everyone was asleep. The writer mentions in one place, he says that not a mouse was stirring. Means not even a mouse, a rat. Mouse is a rat. Even that was not around anywhere. It was not moving anywhere. That means the people taught the cattle also, the animals also, to sleep when? During the daytime. Everyone were asleep. That shows it was a very quiet place, very quiet. Just imagine if a kingdom is so quiet during the morning. Doesn't it seem weird? Yes. And these two strangers, these two people, the guru, saint is the guru, and his disciple, they were not aware of this order or rule being made in that kingdom. So they were just walking about, just searching for food maybe, but they were surprised to see all of them sleeping during daytime. So they kept wandering and wandering. As they were wandering, it became what? It became night. And everyone were awake. They woke up. All the people woke up during the night. And they started to do their work. Businessmen were doing their business. Farmers were farming. Then this guru and the disciple became very hungry. So what did they do? They went to the shops that were opened at night. And they went to buy some groceries. Groceries are the things that they use to make food, like vegetables, pulses, cereals. Okay, so all the food items they wanted to buy. So they went to buy the groceries. And there was another surprise waiting for them. Every shop they went to and anything they bought just costed 1 duddu. Duddu is the name given to a rupee in Kannada. Duddu. They call it duddu. So anything they bought, all the things were so cheap over there. Whether they bought a bunch of bananas or they bought a bag of rice, anything for that matter, it would just cost a rupee, or you can call it 1 duddu. So the Guru and the disciples, they were so very happy because the food in the kingdom was very cheap. Anyone would feel happy, isn't it? But the Guru and the disciple, they actually were very happy. But finally, the Guru realizes that the kingdom was a kingdom of fools. And he decides not to stay there anymore because it will never be safe for them to stay there. So the wise Guru, he was very wise. So he told his disciples that this place was not right for them. And he asked him to leave at once. But this disciple was a foodie, you can say. He loved to eat. So he did not want to leave that place because the food was very cheap. Guru tried to make his disciple understand and told him that everyone out there was a fool and it was very dangerous. The kingdom would not last for a long time. And one day or the other it could harm him. He tries to advise, but the disciple, he didn't want to listen to him. So the Guru left the place, but the disciple remained over there. Okay. Word meanings again. Steering is moving around. Guru, saint. Amazed means shocked and surprised. Duddu is money in Kannada language. Got it? Yes. Now comes the real twist in the story, okay? Listen. One day a thief entered a merchant's house, it seems. And he made a hole in the wall so that he can get into the house. So when he was about to go out of that house after looting all the things, he looted the things, he stole all the things. When he was trying to come out of that wall, the wall broke and it fell on the thief's head. And on the spot, the thief died. So this was really a sad thing which happened to the thief. What happened was the thief's brother was there. This thief's brother, he went directly to the king and he complained that his brother was following his ancient trade, it seems. He calls it so beautifully. He calls it ancient trade. Robbing, he calls that robbing and stealing. He doesn't pose this robbing or stealing to be a crime, but instead he says, he very decently says it is an ancient trade. He calls it an ancient trade. So he says, while my brother was working, he was doing his job, the wall fell on his head and he died. So actually the thief's brother, he's taking advantage of the king's foolishness. He knows that the king is a fool. So he's taking advantage of it. Now the merchant whose wall had fallen, he calls that merchant a culprit. Culprit means a person to be punished. he requested the king to actually punish the merchant and to give compensation for his family. Compensation means some money to help the thief's family, because he complains that the wall of the merchant was not built strong. That's why the wall has fallen, he says. See, this king has to think, right? He never thought. Such a fool he was. As soon as the thief's brother complained, he did not consider the fact. He never actually investigated properly. Instead, he calls the owner of the house. Who's the owner of the house? The merchant. He called him. Now he told the merchant, do you know what happened in your house? See, you had a very weak wall being built, and that fell on the thief, and the thief died. So you are guilty of killing the thief. He said the merchant was wrong. So the merchant has to be punished, he said. Now the merchant pleaded in front of the king. He requested. He said, Lord, it is not my fault, The wall was so weak because the person who made the wall did not construct it properly. So what you have to do is, you can punish the one who built the wall. And moreover, this wall was made during my father's time. And the person who built it is also very old. So he knew him, who was very close by. Now see, the incident was actually investigated, and the blame was put on each other. Each one blamed the other. Come on, let's continue. Let's see what happened. Yes, pursuing is follow. Ancient trade refers to the theft here. Summoned is to call upon someone. So who was summoned? The merchant was summoned. Now the bricklayer is going to be summoned, isn't it? So to call upon someone. Now the merchant blamed whom? Blamed the bricklayer, right? So the king sends his soldier to call the bricklayer who built the wall. His hands and his feet was tied, and they brought him to the palace. The king asked him, did you build the wall? He replied, yes, he did it. Yes, I did. Now the king said, see, the wall you built, was so weak that the wall fell on that poor thief's head and killed him. And because of that, you have to be punished with death. Everyone is passing the blame, right? Merchant passed the blame on whom? On the bricklayer. Now let's see what the bricklayer is trying to say or explain. So the king ordered the soldiers to execute the bricklayer. Execute means to put him to death. Now he thought for a while, and he requested the king to listen to him. He agreed, yes, Lord, it was me who built the wall, and the wall was weak, and I have made a very weak wall, I agree. But please listen that there's a reason behind. Let me give you the reason. He says, when I was building that wall, there was a dancing girl who was roaming around in the street with her anklets. Anklets are what? Golisin solluvolla, that's called anklets. And that anklets, they make some jingling sound, isn't it? So it was that jingling sound actually distracted him. So he could not concentrate on his work, it seems. And he made a weak wall. He says, it was not my mistake. It was the mistake of that girl who distracted me. And he also told that he knew the girl, the dancing girl. So it was not me. I'm not at fault. She is at fault. So you have to punish her instead of me, he says. The king heard this bricklayer's explanation. Such a stupid king he was. He was so satisfied. He was convinced with the excuse that he gave. And he says he calls this case to be a very complicated case because he didn't know how to solve it. So he ordered his messenger to get the dancing girl. See, one after the other. Merchant blames the bricklayer, and the bricklayer is blaming the dancing girl. And let's see what the dancing girl does. Now the dancing girl had become an old woman. She was trembling as she came to the palace. The king asked her, many years ago, were you dancing and roaming around in the lane while the bricklayer was constructing the wall? And your movement distracted him, he says. And now he told her, because you were moving around with the anklets jingling, it distracted the bricklayer, and due to that, he did not work properly. He built a bad wall, and that wall fell on the thief, and the thief is now killed. All this happened because of her, the king says. The thief died. Now, because of that, you should be punished with death, he says. Now, the dancing girl did not know what to do. She thought for a while, and she tried to transfer the blame onto another person. She said, yes, my lord, I was roaming around in the lane again and again. But you know for what? I actually kept moving or going here and there to visit the goldsmith's shop. I had given some gold to make some jewelry out of it. But you know that goldsmith was a dishonest person. Dishonest means he was not true. He kept making excuses and he kept pulling on. He delayed in giving me the jewelry. And due to this, I had to go from my house to the goldsmith's shop very often. And as I was moving, maybe the bricklayer had seen me and I must have distracted the bricklayer. So this is what happened. So I am not at fault now. It was all because of whom? It was all because of the goldsmith. That's why I had to walk in the lane again and again, she says. Now the king heard this and he felt very poor, very sad for the dancing girl. He says, yeah, this dancing girl is right. What she said was right. So he thought a lot, and finally what he did was, he came to know. Now he is deciding over the culprit. He says, now the culprit is whom? The goldsmith. He ordered the soldiers to bring the goldsmith now. See, one after the other, each one blaming the other. Let's see. Now the king orders the bailiffs in the king's court. These bailiffs are law officers who make sure that the decisions of a court are obeyed. So these bailiffs, what they do is they go in search of the goldsmith. Now who's brought? Goldsmith is brought to the court. He's hiding in his shop. He was afraid of being arrested. So when he was brought to the king, in front of the king, he says, now he gives his side of the story. He says the dancing girl was right. And he made many excuses. But it was not his fault, he says. Why does he say that it was not his fault is, he had an order from a rich merchant, it seems. And they had a wedding at their place. So they were in a hurry to get the order done. And that is why the dancing girl's work was getting delayed. So he gives his story. See, another story is being told. Now the king asked the goldsmith to name the rich merchant for whom he had done the jewelry. Now the goldsmith said that the merchant was the same merchant. Who's that merchant? The first man who blamed the bricklayer. You remember? Whose house was burgled. That same merchant. And that merchant's wall only fell on the thief. So he pointed out to that merchant. Now it's come a full circle. The story comes back to the same person from where it started. So, the thief died under the wall. And the merchant blamed whom? Blamed the bricklayer. Bricklayer blames the dancing girl. Dancing girl finally blames the goldsmith. And now the last goldsmith blames whom? Is again coming back to the same merchant. The merchant was called once again. He was called back again. He was crying. And he very well knew that this king was foolish. He would put him to death. So, what can he do now? He came to the king. He said, Lord, it is true that the jewelry was ordered from this goldsmith. But it was not me. It was my father. And my father is dead and gone. So it is not my fault. Now the king thought for a while and he consulted with his ministers and they gave decisions. They made plans and now they're coming back to the merchant. The king said, yes, the merchant's father is the murderer now. Who's the murderer? The merchant's father is the murderer. And because of that, the thief died. Right? Now, though the merchant's father died, the merchant is alive, right? You are alive. You're the son. And you take over all the property of your father. So instead of your father, in place of your father, you have to die. Now you are the criminal, he says. Because you take the father's property, you take his punishment also for his wrongdoing, he says. And he added that when he had seen the merchant for the first time at that moment, he had a feeling that he was the culprit. See? He thought before only, it seems. This king was very wise. He says that I knew that you were the culprit from the very beginning. See what all this king does. So what does he do? He orders the merchant to be punished with what? Death. Come on, let's see what happens. Bricklayer is a person who lays the bricks and builds the walls. Goldsmith is a person who makes ornaments out of what? Gold. Scoundrel is a dishonest person. You call a dishonest person a scoundrel. Okay? Yes. King announced that the merchant has to die. The weapon was getting ready. And now the minister, he felt that the merchant was very thin and he could not be executed on that stake. Stake is the picture I've shown you in the next slide. And he told the king. The king got worried. Now the king actually gives an idea, or he got an idea. What does the king say is, Go search for a man who's fat enough to be executed with the stake. So the merchant would not be put to death. Instead, another man can be executed. Finally, the king sent his servants. They went around looking for a man who was fat enough to be executed. Now, who did they find, you think? They found a man who was very fat, who had become very fat. Any guess? Any guesses? Who was that man, you think? You know, that man was the Guru's disciple. He had become very fat because of overeating. They found him. What did the servants do? They took him. They said, "Come, the king wants you, and we are going to take you to the king." Now the disciple said, "Oh, leave me alone. I'm just a disciple of a guru. I've done nothing. I've done nothing wrong. I'm so innocent. Why are you taking me?" He pleads the servants. But because the servants were ordered to bring a fat man, they found this man and they brought him. Now what happens? Disciple is reminded of whom now? He is reminded of his guru. Let's see what he does. Now he thinks, "Oh, my Guruji was really wise, and he told me not to be with the fools. One day it will harm you," he said, but I never listened to his advice. And now what has happened to him? He is taken to be executed. He was helpless now. So he prayed in his heart to his guru. With his magical power, the guru came to know that the disciple is in trouble. So he comes to rescue whom? To rescue his disciple. Now the guru had arrived to his disciple, and he very well knew the situation there, and it was a very serious situation. What happened was, he was taken to be executed for doing nothing. No wrong was on him, but still he was being taken to be executed. It was only because he was fat. The guru whispers something in his ears. He tells something to the disciple. Now this guru, he tried to trap or cheat the king. What did he do for it? He just asked the king, who was greater between the guru and the disciple? Now the king replied, "Of course, who can be greater? The guru is, of course, greater than the disciple," he said. Okay, so the guru said, "Then if that is the case, you have to execute me first before executing my disciple. You have to put me to death first, and then you have to put my disciple to death," he says. When the disciple heard this, guru's words, he started shouting. He said, "No, I want to die first," he said. And both started arguing. Both of them are arguing over this. They said, Guru says, "No, I want to die first." Disciple says, "No, I want to die first." The king got confused. What has happened to these two? Both are fighting to die. So, but he very well knew that there was some mystery behind it. The king very well knew there was some mystery, some secret he wanted to know. So he asked the guru, and guru took the king aside and slowly told him that he had roamed around the whole world but had not seen a city and a king like him, it seems. He also said that the stake, which they used to kill the disciple was the stake of justice. It was very new. They had not killed any criminal on that stake. He also added, he said, the one who would die first on the stake would be reborn as the king of the kingdom. By telling this, he trapped the king. The one who dies next would be reborn as the minister of the kingdom, he said. He is just lying to the king because he knows the king is a fool. So all this, if he says to the king would believe, right? He wants to rescue the disciple somehow. And moreover, the guru was very wise. He also said, see, I've been a sannyasi or a guru for a long time, and I'm tired of being or leading that life. So he wants to be a king or a minister. So that's why he wanted to be executed first, he says, so that he can be born or reborn as a king after him. See how he traps the king, right? Let's see what happened. After listening to the guru, the king was deep in thought. He didn't want somebody else to take his kingdom. So what did he do? He discussed with his minister. And he told the minister all that which was told by the guru. And he also said that these gurus are holy men, right? They are holy people and they don't speak lies. If the guru and his disciple are murdered, what will happen? They will be reborn as king and minister of the kingdom. So what do they plan is, the king and the minister plan, we should not let the guru and the disciple to become the next king and the minister. So what shall we do? He thought. And what was the decision given? He called the executioners. Executioners are the people who are kept, the soldiers who are kept to kill the criminals. So he called them and he said, I will send the criminals at night. First you should execute the person who comes first, and then the person who comes second. You should be careful, right? You should not make any mistake, he said. And that night what happened? The king and the minister went to the prison where the guru and his disciple were kept. So they wore the clothes of the guru and his disciple. So they disguised themselves so that nobody can resemble them. Disguise means marveshatla. So they dressed themselves as the guru and the disciple. And as they told the servants, whoever comes first should be executed, was the order given before, right? Now who came first, you think, to be executed? Yes, the king. Wanting to become the king again, he didn't want to miss that kingship, right? So he wanted to be the king again, believing the guru's words. What did the king do? He came first. And as it was told by the soldiers that whoever comes first should be executed first, who was executed now? The king was killed. And then who came? The next. The next was the disciple, the minister. So the minister had disguised himself as the disciple and he came next and he was also killed. Now the next day what happened? Now Guru was able to execute his foolish king and his foolish minister, right? So next day the dead bodies of the king and the minister were taken away and was thrown. Now when the people saw, they trembled. Whose dead bodies was that? Whose dead bodies? It was the king and his minister. Oh my. Just imagine the situation, the condition of the people over there. They thought the Guru and the disciple only were executed. Instead, they actually thought that it was the bodies of the Guru and the disciple. But whose bodies were that? The bodies of the king and his minister. So everyone in the kingdom was mourning. Mourning means they cried the death of their king and his minister. And some people thought, after all this was over, some people in the morning thought of the Guru and his disciple and felt that they should go to them. Now a group of people talked to each other. They planned to go and meet whom? The Guru and the disciple. The Guru and the disciple were planning to leave the kingdom also. They wanted to go from that kingdom. But the people stopped them. And the people of that kingdom, thought that they needed a king and a minister. No, now the king and the minister died. So they wanted somebody wise to rule their kingdom. So they requested whom you think? They requested the Guru and his disciple to be the king and the minister of the kingdom. The disciple quickly agreed because he is very fond of that kingdom, isn't it? But the Guru first disagreed, but then agreed to be the king of the kingdom, but on the condition that from then everyone would work in the day and sleep at night. So this was the condition being made. Also, the cost of the things would vary, he said, not just one duddu for everything as a system earlier, isn't it? So everything according to its value, the money also will vary, he said. So it would be like any other place where everything had different rates, something like that. Finally, the Guru changed the kingdom of fools into what? Into a very normal and a wise kingdom where people were happy after that, and the Guru and the minister, wise men, ruled the kingdom from then on. I think you like the story, and I want you to read the lesson because I haven't read the lesson for you. I've just narrated the story and I've given you the hard words and its meanings. Okay? So I request all of you to read the lesson carefully. Let's all be wise like the Guru. Thank you very, very much, children. God bless.